Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Prototype Prime for this amazing podcasting space. We are joined here today by Jeff Pollock of Pollock Commercial. Thanks for coming in, Jeff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. So I'm Jeff Pollock with Pollock Commercial. We are an Atlanta-based commercial real estate firm. We have two primary business lines that we operate in. The first one is we represent business owners and entrepreneurs to help them identify and then move into new office spaces. And then we also work for landlords and help them to market their office spaces to tenants.
Awesome. And you're working with a lot of technology companies, I think I was told?
Yeah, we work with a lot of different technology companies, other professional services firms, creative services firms, and just general business folks, as well. So, highly referral based, and we're very fortunate to have our name passed around, and we love helping folks out.
Very cool. So we are all about company culture here, and we had a really good conversation before about company culture, and we've talked about it on the podcast, how space plays into company culture. So you're the expert as far as space and what that vibe is for everybody. So I'd love to hear an experience maybe on what you're seeing from a culture perspective on how space is playing into it for maybe technology companies, those people really that seem to be leading the charge on how their space is built out, and how that's coming along with other organizations that are outside of that.
Sure. Well, it's a big topic, so We'll try to fit it all in. I would say, historically, landlords would deliver office space and they would focus on things like highway access and parking ratio and, maybe glass and sort of simplistic approach to marketing their buildings. But in the last 10 to 15 years, it's completely changed. And now they're much more focused on the employee experience and what amenities the property has in addition to the traditional aspects like location. So trying to amenitize their buildings with common area spaces with fun things like bocce or cornhole areas or other things, parks so people can get outside, and then just activating their lobbies so that they're more interesting with maybe coffee or more common area spaces as opposed to just museum quality finishes that you just kind of walk through.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners are competing on talent, right? I think a lot of people are competing on talent nowadays. So maybe we should share with them like the most extreme thing you've seen, like what they're up against if they have a very antiquated office or office environment. What's the bleeding edge of this? What's the most extreme thing you've seen to date?
Probably the most extreme project we've been a part of. We met a interactive marketing agency who told us on day one of the project that they wanted to work in a spaceship.
Okay.
And so
that's easy enough.
Yep.
Work in a spaceship.
And so we weren't sure how dedicated they were to this vision, but at the end of the day, they delivered a combination of Return of the Jedi meets 2001 Space Odyssey, complete with cockpit areas, spaceship-shaped doors, starry sky,
right,
and pretty intergalactic type of setup.
Nice.
And video games sort of throughout, cereal bar, kegerator,
right.
Pretty epic environment for sure. So that's probably the most extreme.
That's kind of as far as we need to go is building a spaceship in our office.
I think so.
Okay. Well, we're not going to set the bar too high.
Right.
Awesome. So as far as company culture is concerned, you've worked for a lot of other real estate agents, other organizations. What's the most memorable culture outside of your company, of course? What's the most memorable culture you're at and why?
I might spin it and say I found that the companies that have created the best culture are employee-focused, and they're unique, and so they spend a lot of time surveying employees. The old model of let's locate the office by the CEO's home or golf course or whatever, kind of the antiquated approach has changed to more let's map our employees' addresses and locate, more central to them, or let's map, other amenities that are important to them, and completely flipping the focus on leadership first to more culture of the employees first. So I don't know if I'm avoiding your question.
No,
I don't want to single out one particular firm, but
well, you don't have to name them. We just want to know like why it was memorable.
Yeah,
but
on your other question or on your answer though around like the location. So
I'm very familiar with like the hot spots in Atlanta. You got Buckhead, you got, Midtown Spring down near Georgia Tech. What are some of the other trends you're seeing maybe outside of the major areas? What are they doing why are they locating in other areas? What types of areas are they locating in? How does that factor in?
Yeah, I think what's changing in Atlanta is so spread out geographically, and it's such a large metro area. And over the last 10 or 15 years, you had this resurgence of Inman Park and East Atlanta and Grant Park and sort of the east side. And then, of course, now West Side is exploding in West Midtown, which started really in the early 2000s, then paused with the economy slowdown and is now catching back up rapidly. But I think the bigger trend is because the city is so big and traffic is a real concern and moving around is not as easy as it always has been, you're starting to see these more densely populated commercial nodes in areas that historically have been perceived as suburban. So like downtown Alpharetta is booming right now. Duluth has a little restaurant corridor now. Dunwoody is even trying to modernize. There's a big project that's been announced in addition to some of the corporate headquarters in that area. And you're seeing that really across the city, south side, kind of around. So now you no longer have to go to the perceived hotspot. Each municipality is competing to create their own magic, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know we're seeing it in, I live in Swanee, and the town center and everything that they're doing. I know Lawrenceville's adding on even as far out as like Grayson. I mean, they're adding a little area, Tech Alpharetta, and, all the other spaces they're popping up and growing. I think people are just tired of driving.
Yeah, and all these different areas have something unique to offer. Yeah. And so it's great. It's great for the city. The metro area, I should say. Great for each city individually.
Yeah, fantastic. So as far as space is concerned, what is one thing that is pretty much table stakes now, something you pretty much have to have or you're seeing across the board that you probably didn't see 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the model historically had been, reception area, formal reception desk, maybe there's a conference room, linear hallway, turn left or right, and then, offices on glass, and then any kind of cubicle area or bullpen sort of interior. And that's pretty much been completely shifted. And so reception areas are much more like living rooms. There's less formal, depending on the company, but generally speaking, there is a sense of arrival for the deliveries and so forth. But it's much more living room style, softer furniture, artwork, corporate branding, things like that. Typically a large conference room, big enough for the entire team. But instead of the private offices being on glass, most of the companies that require private offices are putting them on the interior. And hopefully there's glass, on the inside so that they get some natural light. But the bullpen spaces are now on the perimeter. And so, the bigger group of workers that are sitting in that sort of flexible area is benefiting more from the light in that sort of space. So it's kind of a reverse.
Right. So instead of one person traditionally having this big corner office with lots of light in it, helping one person, now you could fit 12 people in that same space because of high density and things like that, and they're all getting value from it. And
we're also seeing culture-focused leaders coming out of their private offices. We're seeing movable desks, sit-stand desks, project-based pods. There's all different types of products on wheels or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So the office may change based on their workload. And so you'll see different styles of groupings. There might be larger conference rooms that teams are going into, but the idea is that there's common space that's very flexible based on project-based work, and then they'll have some sort of phone rooms or other private rooms so people that do need to take calls can do that. But it's just kind of a shift of the historical. Everyone's in their office,
right?
And there's like the bullpen, with 8-foot cubes. You don't see the historical, cubicle styles from like Office Space, the movie.
Right.
Those are going
you
away.
Have to drill it, knock it over to get some light.
They certainly still exist in certain applications, but since we're talking about culture,
right.
And good culture, we're seeing a lot less of the traditional cubes and more of almost residential style finishes, woods and metals, and like this kind of white type finishes where it feels a little more comfortable as opposed to formal.
Right.
Generally speaking.
So we went from like a lot of these closed off office spaces. Everybody had, doors, not a lot of lighting. There's been a huge trend in the open office plans and different work modes and work spaces. Is there something indicating where we're going in the future with these spaces? Is there something happening now or in the last year or two where it's like, okay, it gives you an indication of what's next after open floor plans?
We went from heavily private partitioned setups to maybe 2 open.
Okay, yeah.
And so we're starting to see sort of a shift a little bit back towards some more private spaces, but as opposed to private in the sense that they're dedicated for one particular executive, it's just more of a space where you can go and have a private experience.
Gotcha.
And I think that's probably where we're going to stay. Some combination of, bullpen, because depending on the type of work that you do, there is a time to get on the phone.
Right.
And if you have people next to the person on the phone, that's distracting. So if you walk into a lot of these creative type companies, you'll see a lot of people with headphones, and they're coding or they're working on a website or whatever they're doing, and they're on headphones, which is sort of not the point of the collaboration space, right? Because they're just sort of dialed in. And so you're trying to balance allowing people to be productive, but also creating this collaborative environment.
Nice.
And so it's a back and forth.
So you're kind of seeing the trend would be we have the closed off office space, I would say closed and dedicated, right? So not only is it closed off, but it's dedicated to a person or whatever it is. We went to a little bit overly open. I've experienced that in some places where it's like, is anybody selling around here? Like the whole place is nobody's ever on the phone.
Right.
I don't know how you get work done without being on the phone with clients, but I know some companies that do, but most of them have to get on the phone. So this overly open space, and then now it's more private space than we've had in the last few years, but instead of the dedicated aspect, now they're flex. So
That's
it's
exactly right.
a collaborative room, bigger, smaller, phone booth rooms. I'm seeing a lot of those. I'm seeing roll-up doors, where they can just quickly expand a room or open it up to be very open, or they can close the door. What else are you seeing that kind of helps partition things off? You mentioned rolling items. Is there any other unique ways people have partitioned rooms where it doesn't feel like the old school folding door system like in a ballroom?
There's sort of some reinvention of sliding doors, that aren't like the old, convention hall sliding doors. They have a little character to them, or glass. And the other piece that we're seeing, there's a lot of new loft office space that's been delivered in the last, call it 10 years in Atlanta. It used to be a very small segment of the market. Now it's much larger. And a lot of these spaces are old industrial buildings that have been converted.
Right.
So we have...
Is that like a studioplex? Or
like a studioplex
like
or Stoveworks or something like that. And then there's projects in every submarket now. But industrial buildings historically have truck doors that with roll-up.
Right.
And so companies now are putting glass roll-up doors, and then they're building deck space. And so we're seeing a lot of outdoor amenitized space where an office worker could open that door and sit outside, and so kind of bringing the outside in and allowing them to just enjoy a nice day here in Atlanta, which is a lot of the year. So more companies are craving that ability to have some workspace attached to their office that's private for them, where they can enjoy being outside.
Awesome. So when it comes to company culture, what do you find to be your biggest challenge?
For our particular company?
For your company, right.
I think our challenge is the nature of our business is that we're client-facing, and so our entire team is not always together at the same time. So we have to manufacture opportunities to spend time together, just the nature of our business.
Gotcha.
So we have some regular meetings and things like that to make sure that we're have a chance to connect. And we're also a small team. So, we may not have some of the same challenges that a much larger organization would have with sort of siloed divisions and things like that.
Yeah, so with the remote team, or, remote may be the distributed team and being out in the field all the time, what do you find is the best way to get together and make sure that you guys are spending time together, your team is spending time together?
We have a weekly meeting that we've adopted. It's a lunch meeting, so everybody's got a good reason to be there. We rotate who picks the lunch that's delivered, and that's just our chance to go through the projects that we're working on. I'm very much a player coach, so in addition to managing the firm, I'm also handling client activity, and so we just need that dedicated time to all get together, collaborate. There's times where we could help each other, with information or other ideas. And then there's some projects that we're working on together. And so, we do have other meetings that we get together to collaborate on those projects. But, we use technology. I think most firms have moved to the cloud.
Right.
We're no different. We're Google-based. We have a CRM that's online. Our phone system is online. So we're, everybody can function, wherever they are, remote. Everybody's got a smartphone
Got it.
in this day and age. So we try to leverage the technology as much as we can.
Okay. We've talked a little bit about, the upper end, right? All the cool things that are happening. What do you think the impact is to an organization that kind of doesn't get on board with that doesn't upgrade their space, that really doesn't think it matters? What are you seeing out there? What do you think the impact is to them?
I think it's as much of anything a morale situation. And so people that are working in these thoughtful, creative office environments, and even if they're not a spaceship, but there's a color scheme or there's artwork or there's lots of ways you can enhance your space without going to the ultimate extreme.
Right.
But I think leaders that demonstrate an interest in creating a positive and upbeat environment, maybe they have their core values on the wall, to use an EO term, it gives, I think, a sense of community to the organization and tends to boost morale. And the alternative, to look at it more negatively, if you have a dark space, if you have old cubicles, it creates more of an isolation for the individual employees, and we tend to see just lower energy around the office, and we don't see those companies really thriving in this environment.
Yeah. Anything else I missed about company culture and how space impacts it?
I think it may be helpful for your audience to talk a little bit about the process, and when you could start thinking about company culture, and because I think it's a newer thought process for decision makers. A lot of times it becomes an afterthought, but it doesn't have to be. You can approach these ideas on the front end when you're going to look for space, and it will help inform the tour for the different locations that you want to go to, and that's something that your broker can help on the front end to identify. We have a survey that we provide. What are the priorities that you're looking for, and sometimes budget may dictate, or location may dictate, or size, or availability. But I think just focusing on this earlier in the process, as opposed to moving into a space, maybe settling on certain things, and then trying to renovate retroactively when you're already in the space.
Yeah. So what are some of those key decisions? I mean, the things that come to mind for me are, traditionally I would have gone and looked at a Class A space, right? A nice building, nice entryway, and now there's a lot of options, right? There's the Stoveworks kind of places. There's these industrial places. Is that part of your brand? Is that part of who you are and your people? Is it Class A? Is it what are some of the questions that kind of lead them down this path of saying, if you want to pick a space that matches your culture and your brand, and that you're going to be able to upgrade later, what decisions do I need to make today?
Yeah. Well, I think the old definitions, Class A, B, and C, are more difficult to quantify because Class A used to be nice lobby with maybe a little gift shop or something like that, a shoe shine stand. Right. Some of these things we just don't see anymore. And the other thing that's happening is a lot of older buildings are trying to keep up, and they're renovating, and so maybe they don't fit that historical Class A definition, but you walk into the space and they're beautiful. You're surprised. So it's not so much that definition, but I think it's more about, obviously you want to find the location, generally speaking, and maybe you're comparing one or two different submarkets. Some people are very clear that they don't want to be in a parking deck. Okay. They don't want to deal with an elevator. They want outdoor space. So these types of things will narrow your search very quickly when you're looking at a particular submarket. And then we talk about head count, desired layout, and then anticipated growth.
Whether you want to pay for parking in Atlanta?
Yeah, or whether you want to pay for parking or not.
So that was a big one for us.
Yeah, although it's getting harder in town to not find or to find buildings with free parking. But then we like to spend a lot of time. Generally these arrangements are 3+ years. And could be 5, could be 7, or longer. The longer you're there, generally the landlord offers more in tenant improvement dollars, which goes a long way towards building this culture. So we like to try to work with business owners to try to forecast, where do you think you're going to be in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years? And it's difficult because they don't have that crystal ball. But the more thoughtful you can be, it allows the broker and the landlord to work together to create a transaction. Maybe there's adjacent space that you can expand into, or maybe this is going to be a temporary space while they build out a bigger space down the road. So it's sort of trying to anticipate with the most thoughtful way that you can sort of your future needs.
Gotcha.
Is also very helpful.
Got it. Okay. Any other items that the listeners need to think about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it, but of course, we're available to answer any questions moving forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Should
Well,
anybody want to dive into these topics further? But
reach out to Jeff Pollock on LinkedIn to find out more about building your space based on your company culture when you're looking to move, build out, grow, whatever it might be. Thank you for joining us on the Epic Company Culture Podcast.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.